In this video, we're going to learn a little bit about the background of if-then statements and how we can ultimately use logic to control the flow of our computer code. So one of the key elements here when we're thinking about if-then statements in use in computer code is that we want the computer code to make a choice, just as we do many times throughout our day. So these if-then statements really aren't different than many of the ways we operate, at least intuitively, every single day. And so the main thing is to go back to this idea of logic. What we're going to need to be able to do is to have a computer evaluate statements that are true or false to be able to make these choices. So, for example, a logical statement may be 5 less than symbol 10. And so the computer is going to ask itself, is 5 less than 10? That would be evaluated as true because it is a true statement. Similarly, if we had the inequality here of 100 less than 5, that would be false because 100 is not less than 50. Excuse me, I think I said 5 before, I meant 50. And so in our computer code, in order to use this logic and create logical statements, we need to use these logical operators, which are typical inequality symbols, as well as two other ones that may not be quite as intuitive to novice computer users. So we'll start off with the four common ones. We have our typical greater than symbol, greater than equal to, using the two symbols in combination, both the greater than sign and the equal sign. And similarly, we have less than and less than or equal to. And then we have these last two. If we wanted to evaluate to see if something was equal to something else, then we use to equal sign. And that if we wanted to see if something was not equal to each other, then we would use exclamation points equal sign. And so what we're going to do is create logical statements so that then we can have the computer say, if something is true, then do something. Otherwise, either do nothing or do something else. Okay? So it all goes back to this idea of logic. And so specifically here, if we want to think about a general if-then statement that we might use in life, that it ultimately goes back to this idea that under certain conditions, do something. Otherwise, we'll maybe do something else. So here's an example. If I'm feeling hungry, then I'm going to go find something to eat. Otherwise, I'll continue watching YouTube videos. So that's kind of a fun example to explain this idea of if-then statements. And so the question becomes then, how do we actually write this for Pythonic things? And so we're going to talk just briefly about it here in this video, but then there will be a separate video that talks about how to actually do it in code using Jupyter Hub and that Jupyter Notebook environment. And so if-then statements in Python specifically can have either a very simple or a more complex structure. And so here we see all of the different options we can put within an if statement. We can test multiple logical statements, and whenever it hits the first true logical statement, then it will go ahead and do that something. So we might have a logical statement up here with an if, and it says if, and then it'll test this logical statement. If it's true, then it will do something one, and then move all the way down and continue below our if statement and move on with our program. But if this logical statement comes out false, then it'll go to what we call this else if statement or elif statement. Check that logical statement. If it is true, then it'll do something too. And then continue on again at the bottom of the if statement, moving on. And in this example, we actually have a third option to check in terms of logical statements to try to do something. And if all three of these logical statements turn out false, then we're going to come down to what we call the else statement here, and then do this as a default something. And so notice here that we have if, our logical statement in parentheses, and then a colon. The colon here is acting as the then statement. Okay? And so we can have any number of else if statements, but any if statement must have at least one if. And it doesn't have to have anything else. It's always good practice to put in an else if feasible. That's it on the background of if statements. Please go watch the video on using if statements to go try your hand at making if statements.